Hi, my name is Nancy and welcome to this Caregiver Journal. If you are watching this and you are not a patient and you are not a caregiver, this is kind of for you. I was thinking recently of an instance where someone made a comment, and it really was a comment made out of ignorance. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they just didn't understand what was going on. Last March, we were trying to get my husband down to our son's wedding in Wilmington, North Carolina. And Dan's body was starting to shut down. He was heading towards liver failure. He could barely walk. He had to sit in our car, and he would change from the back seat to the front seat to laying down to sitting up. We could only travel 3 to 4 hours a day, so it took us 2 entire days to make a 7-hour trip down to Wilmington, North Carolina. And when we arrived down there, the first thing we were each thinking separately was, we need to be heading home to the hospital. But we didn't say it out loud, and he started taking some antibiotics, and we made it through that week. But it was, one of those times where you're not flippant when you say, by the grace of God, we made it through that week. And he was able to be present at our son's wedding, and I was able to be present at our son's wedding. But someone that we know had moved to North Carolina, and they were not involved in the wedding. And at some point they had texted, and I said, oh, we're heading down to Joseph's wedding. And a while later, I said, how do you like living in North Carolina? They had moved away and moved back. And their comment through text was, we like living here because when people go to the beach, they can stop by and say hi to us on their way. And that was a week or two after we had traveled down to Joseph's wedding, and we had rushed back. I can't remember if Dan went right back into the hospital or not, but he was in the hospital shortly after that. And I took that text and I thought, this is a stab at us driving to North Carolina and not stopping and saying hi. But they have no idea the torture of that trip. And even if we didn't have to get off the highway, adding 10 more minutes onto that trip would have just been terrible. And I thought, first of all, that's a person who should have known how we were doing, because they should have been calling us and they should have been asking us, but they did not. And because they didn't have that information, they were going to make that judgment on us, not understanding all that was going on in our orbit. So I'm sure that there have been times during Dan's illness that we offended people, but they probably did not understand what was going on in the reality of our life at the time. We did not have people over to our house. When people came into the area, we had them stay in a hotel. We didn't have people into our house because Dan was uncomfortable, because he would be sick. And there's a lot of bodily fluids when you have a terminal illness. And he just wasn't comfortable with having people around. So if you are on the outskirts of someone else's illness journey, I think my advice or tip is just to be careful with snide comments, because you might not understand the whole picture, and something may have happened that was not a slight towards you, but it was just somebody trying to survive the life journey that they're on at that moment. And maybe asking some questions and kindness might be more helpful than making some comments.